Something that's bothered me for a long time is just how fucking boring men's fashion is. Hello friends, my name is Yali and I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of my brand new series called What the Fuck is Up with Men? A series in which we explore different issues surrounding men and masculinity in our changing society. This is the very first episode, so if you like what you see, please consider subscribing for more thoughtful conversations and contemplations. Alright, well, let's get into it. So, just what the fuck is up with men's fashion? It seems that men have two basic archetypes. We got the classic business suit and the humble t-shirt and jeans. From there, we have plenty of subcategories such as business casual, streetwear, and athleisure, to name a few of the more mainstream ones. Now obviously I chose these specific photos to prove my point, but I think we all know men who dress more or less like this. Now what do all of these looks have in common? That's right, they're fucking boring. All jokes aside, what I see is that they're really kind of monochromatic and flat. Sure, each guy has 2 or 3 different colors going on, but aside from the heathering on Mr. Athleisure's sweater and the stripe and logo on Mr. Streetwear's pants and shirt, none of these guys really have anything distinct, patterns, logos, design, anything like that that sets them apart. Even their haircuts are fairly uniform, with only Mr. Athleisure sporting hair that's even slightly longer than the norm for men. Now, I don't point all this out to say that these guys look bad per se, they look fine, it's just boring. Why's men's fashion gotta be so simplistic? Let's now compare with women's fashion. Personally, I am jealous as hell of women's fashion. I am pansexual, but I tend to lean towards women. Besides compulsory heterosexuality, which I plan to make a whole video on in the future, subscribe, I think one of the main reasons that I lean towards women is that they just look nicer. Besides how clothes can accentuate certain body parts, such as a low neck dress that draws attention to a woman's cleavage, women's fashion is just so much more fun. They get to wear patterns and colors and so many different styles. Women don't just have shirts, they have tops, blouses, crop tops, tube tops, bandeaus, the list goes on. They got a million ways just to cover their titties. Men, what do they get? Shirt with no sleeves. Shirt with short sleeves. Shirt with long sleeves. Shirt with long sleeves and buttons. You see how it just doesn't compare? Another thing I think is important to consider is that women have largely overcome the notion of gendered clothing. It's just as common to see a woman wearing a frilly dress as it is to see a woman wearing jeans and a t-shirt, just like any man. However, the same does not hold true when the genders are reversed. Sure, we have femboys, but usually if you see someone masculine wearing a skirt or a crop top, the likelihood that they're cisgendered and straight is pretty low. Every once in a while we get a cool look from someone like Young Thug or Jaden Smith, but these are the exceptions and it's not a regular thing for either of them, usually reserved for an album cover or an evening on the red carpet. Of course, I gotta be a little bit reductive in my explanation, but the point is that men are much more limited in what is considered acceptable fashion. Of course, there are men who dress loud, but they are the exception, whereas for women, dressing flashy is much more normalized. Now, why is this? Do men just not care about how they look? Or is there something a bit more sinister underpinning their choices? The British artist and writer Grayson explores this idea in his essay, The Rise and Fall of Default Man. Link in description. He describes how the business suit allows men to simultaneously be perceived as powerful, while also, in a way, making them invisible. When a man wears a suit, he looks like he is simply going about his day, doing something important, doing society, so to speak. The suit is the uniform of the stock trader, the politician, the CEO. Unless they're on the news for some scandal, these men receive very little attention from random passers-by. They are seen as the default. The business suit is not only a symbol of power, it is also a shield, a mask that a man can put up so as not to reveal his true self. If he did not have the option of the suit, he would have to make the decision of how to dress himself. Suppose he wore something that others deemed unmanly or even just plain tacky. That would be a huge blow to the man's ego, and as we know, men's egos are often quite fragile. Just take a look at this man. Presumably that's his baby, which he helped create by having sex with a woman, arguably one of the most manly things that a man can do. Still, the baby is not enough evidence of his masculinity. He must prove his manhood by outfitting all his baby gear with the aesthetic of the military, the aesthetic of strength and violence. You can't make this stuff up, folks. There's a whole market for decorating various mundane objects in tactical camouflage to give them that veneer of manly power. God, I am worried about men. But okay, they aren't fragile just because that's how men are innately. Their egos are built upon an unstable foundation, one with a very limited scope of what is acceptable for men, not just in how they look, but in how they behave and the activities that they partake in. I could go on for hours about how the patriarchy stifles men just as much as women, if not even more so in some cases, but that'll have to wait for another day. For now, I want to talk about my personal experiences coming out of that shell, and maybe help you men out there do the same. It was in my senior year of high school the first time I ever wore a skirt. I had been fascinated with the idea of cross-dressing ever since I first heard about it in middle school, and even played Edna Turnblad in my 8th grade's production of Hairspray. But it wasn't until years later that I would fully embrace the idea that I could wear whatever I wanted. Even still, in the first few years I limited my cross-dressing to when I was on stage with my old rock and punk bands. The history of men in bands wearing feminine clothing gave me a sort of protection. If anyone claimed I was a sissy, I could just say it was part of the spectacle. Although this was what I projected outwardly, on the inside there was something about cross-dressing that just felt really right. Men, if you've never worn a skirt, I highly recommend trying it out, if even just for a minute. I think you might be surprised to find out how compatible it is with what you got packing down there. As I continued to experiment on stage, ever so slowly I began to do it off stage as well. It started with wearing some cut-off jean shorts that an ex gave me. I would coordinate them with other relatively masculine clothing so that people would know that I was not to be messed with. In the years since, I've gotten much more comfortable wearing whatever I want to on a given day. Sometimes I do go boring and practical. After all, I'm not always in the mood for attention. But these days I usually feel best in a mix of masculine and feminine clothing. In fact, at this point I don't even really consider the gender of clothing. I just think about how I want to look and feel on any given day. Trust me, nothing beats a crop top and a flowy skirt on a hot summer day, allowing my skin to breathe in the warm air and soak in all the vitamin D it can handle. I also make it a point to wear a lot of different colors. And that's not just a man thing. In the last few years, white, gray, and black have been the dominant colors in mainstream fashion. And while their simplicity does make them easy to coordinate, it's just not me. I have a vibrant soul, and I need my clothes to reflect that. I should point out that I'm a fairly large white man, which gives me a lot of privilege in terms of safety with these experiments. In my most feminine outfits, I sometimes get mistaken for a woman from behind, but as soon as I turn around and they see my facial hair and rippling muscles, they quickly back off. One of my favorite outcomes of mixing up feminine and masculine clothing is the sheer look of confusion I sometimes see on people's faces. When I'm out in one of my mixed up outfits, a lot of people just don't know what to do. Isn't it funny that me simply adorning myself in a different fabric than is expected can cause such a commotion? I think it's important to challenge these long-standing ideas of how men should dress, because in challenging one aspect of masculinity, you kind of bring the whole thing crumbling down. Last year, I had 2 revelations. The first came as I was walking down the street to a pride parade wearing, you guessed it, a crop top and a skirt. I was crossing the street when a pickup truck drove by and honked at me. I looked in and met the gaze of some day laborers, all wearing plain white tees, flipping me off and hollering nasty words at me. My knee-jerk reaction was to flip them off right back, but I took a second to think what had caused their reaction. I did not know these men, and they did not know me. What about my existence was so threatening to them? I don't know if they'll ever figure it out for themselves, but I'm pretty sure that they were jealous. jealous that I had found the secret to breaking out of traditional manhood. Here I was, living my best life, feeling great about myself, on my way to a huge party with a community of people who had also figured out how to break out of the constricting boxes that society had put on them. There they were, crammed into the cab of a truck, probably going home from a hard day's work, all wearing one of the few default uniforms allowed to them. I really hope they get to try on a skirt someday. The second revelation is from an event that actually occurred way back in 2015. I was on my way to see Melody's Echo Chamber wearing a super cute gender-bendy outfit. At the time, I lived with several men, one of whom regularly had his bros over. I was friendly enough with these guys that when I walked out into the living room, I gave them a little 360 and asked if they thought I looked cute. In the moment, I got about the response I expected, which was, sure. It's not like I expected them to be excited for me, but it was nice just to be accepted. The next day, though, my roommate clued me in that after I left, one of his friends voiced disapproval for how I dressed. Credit to the rest of the boys, they shut him down pretty quick, basically saying it was my life to live how I want. Gotta give it up for the libertarians, am I right? It wasn't until last year, after the Pride incident, that I reflected back on that day. Again, I asked myself, what was it about my existence that was so threatening to that guy? The conclusion I came to was that when he saw me, something in his brain told him that he found me attractive. His brain wasn't necessarily responding to me directly, but rather to my outfit. I had on a short skirt and thigh-high socks. What man doesn't find that attractive? So he was attracted to the femininity that he saw before him, but that clashed with his knowledge that I was a boy, and that admitting any sort of attraction, even just to himself, would be conceding the possibility of homosexuality. If you've ever asked the question, what does it mean to be a man? One of the first things you probably came up with is being attracted to women. Following that logic, attraction to anyone other than a woman would make you less of a man, and as we already discussed, the male ego tends to be very fragile. There's certainly more to it, to be explored another day, but I really think that this is one of the big reasons that trans women and feminine gay men experience so much violence at the hands of straight cis men. In order to prove that they are solely attracted to cis women, they must brutalize anyone who brings that narrow scope of attraction into question. It's honestly a disgrace, and I really wish that men would be more open and comfortable with themselves so that they would stop externalizing their stifled feelings in the form of violence. I truly believe that at their core, men have just as much capacity as women to be kind, caring, and emotional. The reason that they don't do so is that the current definitions of masculinity, though they have expanded, still have a very narrow range of acceptable behavior. There's a lot more to it, but changing how we expect and allow men to dress is just one step in the process of ending patriarchal oppression. Thank you so much for watching this video. I've been interested in men's issues for a long time, and am dismayed at how often men's activism turns into misogyny and other forms of bigotry. My goal with this series is to illuminate what I think are some of the most prominent issues that men face today, such that the next generation can live more equally and freely. I already have a number of scripts in the works, but if you have any topic you'd like me to cover, please leave a comment letting me know. I'm also more than happy to answer any questions you might have, and I really want to engage in some thoughtful discussions. I'm new to the video essay game, so I'm relying on a lot of feedback from you, the viewers. Once again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have an amazing day. Goodbye!